to the BJ Show. Let's rock and roll. Rock and roll. Come on, everybody. Let's lose control. Brad and John, they're the ones to follow. Yeah, ready for the ride. It's the BJ Show. BJ Show.
It is the BJ Show. Today's date is June 11th. The reason I do that is because of the fact that a lot of people listen to the show live, but even more listen to it on, in the old days, we'd call it tape delay. Now we call it podcasting, YouTube, platform, all that kind of stuff. And matter of fact, you can find our podcast at bjshow.co. You can find the video podcast at bjshow.us. And John's not happy about that. That is John Combest. Good morning to you, John.
Good morning to you, Brad. What I am happy about is that we're on Apple Podcasts now, thanks to Nick Perryman.
Yes, and John is the guy. You know, John and I have sort of like this relationship. Maybe we're sort of like married. That John is like the woman because he's the one saying, Brad, you need to do this. It'll help the show. Okay, honey, I'll do it.
I'm such a nag, I know. How selfish of me to want to do something to help your radio station that you own, Brad. Very selfish of me.
But the amazing thing about this is, if you know the behind the scenes, let me grab the curtain. I'm going to pull the curtain back. I don't know if you heard the curtain going back, John.
Is this Wicked too? I've been waiting for this.
I'm pulling the curtain back that John is like one of these guys that's a VIP. He is a VVIP, very, very important person. And I have figured out, a friend of mine called me last night and said, you know, I know the whole story behind John Combest that you don't know. I said, why is that? He says, you know how you had this discussion with him the other morning about how he thought it was such a great idea that David Hoffmann bought the Missourian? I go, yeah. I go, why do you think David Hoffmann bought the Missourian? I go, I don't know. He says, David Hoffmann calls John Combest about every decision he's going to make. And the ones that John is thumbs up on, David executes. The one that John's thumbs down, That's why they bought the Missourian, but they didn't buy my radio stations. That's the only reason why.
That's exactly right. Yeah, I did not give him the thumbs up, though. And I have several stories from the Washington Missourian up to date, Brad. And David Hoffmann won't like it, but I always link to a paywall-free version as well. I'm going to be Brad Hildebrand. Don't give the Hoffmans any money. Read the paywall-free version.
I never said that. I've never said that in my life.
There we go.
I've never said that in my life.
You know what I heard, Brad? I heard people used to click on the regular version of the Washington Missourian, but ever since the Hoffmans bought it, it's gone the same way as the Hillerman Nursery. Locals don't want to support it. Yeah, that's the ticket.
John.
Anyway, you can find several pieces from the Washington Missourian on the website today, Brad.
John, if you were a Facebook guy, you would understand exactly where I'm coming from, because the Facebook posts on, there's a couple different page, you grew up in Washmo, stuff like that. Let me put it to you this way. If this were Fleischman Hillard advising the Hoffmans, they would say, you know, I think it might be a good idea that you just sold everything you owned in Washington and left town. That's all I can tell you.
Yeah, he's laughing all the way to the bank, Brad. And so is somebody in story number 3. But where's Casey at?
He's right here.
I'm Casey Kasem.
And what do you do, Casey? He counts them down, and we start with?
In third place,
Mayor Cara Spencer was in Jefferson City yesterday talking about the devastating storms that hit St. Louis last month. I'll highlight a piece brought to us by Kurt Erickson of the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. Tornado aid sails through legislative committee ahead of Missouri House vote. And here's what Cara Spencer told the House Budget Committee. Quote, what happened in St. Louis on May 16th is almost impossible to put into words. The tornado was on the ground for 23 miles. It was at times a mile wide. It was an 8-mile path of destruction in the city. So she says that she knows that the state success is tied to St. Louis City success. So she had what, by all acclaims, Brad, what I saw on social media was a resounding performance, an acclaimed performance. Probably I should say it better that way. FEMA officials will be in the city tomorrow, and Mayor Cara Spencer, not tomorrow, today. And Spencer hopes that a timeline for how aid will be prioritized will become clearer when she talks to FEMA officials today. So what I think is interesting about this, Brad, Just imagine a year ago, Tashara Jones, let's say, going to the House Budget Committee, asking for a whole bunch of money. Do you think that would have been well received?
No.
And so what a difference a year makes.
Well, I think there's extenuating circumstances here. You said something very interesting. Let me go back to your and let me see what, if you can remember your exact quote. You said that Cara said that as the city goes, so goes the state. Is that what you said?
Yeah, her quote is, "We know that the state's success is tied to our success."
So is that why we're doing so poorly?
I don't know, Brad. I think the state's doing pretty well. I wouldn't say the city's doing very well.
See, I will say that as the head of the Westplex Chamber of Commerce, the fate of the Westplex is indirectly proportional to the fate of the St. Louis city. What do you think of that, John? Does that make any sense to you?
I think that a few days ago I went to your YouTube station, Brad, and I saw the thumbnail that said, "A rising tide lifts all boats."
I do.
And I was like, Brad has been saying that for at least 5 years, because that was the clip. I was frankly looking back to see if on your old stations you would put in any like meaningful effort. So I was looking through your old YouTube stations, and I was like, I know that quote that Brad says in 2025. He was saying this in 2020.
But see, John, the crazy thing about this is people listen to that and they go, I don't get it. Okay, why do all the stores congregate? In the old days, it was a mall. Why do they all build stores down at Chesterfield Valley? And they could use the radio analogy of going like, well, if I built my store in Chesterfield Valley, I don't want any other stores near me. I want to be the only store in Chesterfield Valley. That would be the late departed Steve Casper and maybe even some of the other radio guys. But the smart real estate guys and the smart retail people realize that if you put a bunch of stores together, even ones that directly compete with each other, everybody benefits. Get what I'm saying, John?
I get exactly what you're saying. And people can go to a Simon Outlet Mall and they can drop a little money at Tommy Hilfiger. They could drop a little bit money at Sunglass Hut. And then they can go home and do what I do every week, which is read the Chesterfield crime reports and see how many people from St. Louis City are coming out to rob cars and steal sunglasses.
It's like I've told John every time I bring up a story, John will say, you said that 3.2 years ago on May 31st at 2 o'clock in the morning.
I do, yeah, and it's never that far back. It's usually the week prior.
It's like I was being courted by a banker who lived in Clayton, and she says to me, there's no crime in Clayton. And I go, yeah, that's what you think. There's lots of crime in Clayton. A, the police and the city are really good at covering up. And B, if you're some guy who's going to be boosting, stereo equipment from somebody's house, you're not going to be, stealing some 30-year-old Kenwood receiver from your next door neighbor. You're going out to Clayton and grabbing
you're not going to go to Pagedale or Kinlock. Right. You're going to go to Wildwood.
Right, and you're going to grab the Sonos systems. You know what I'm saying? That's what you got to be doing.
Hey, Brad, before I forget here, speaking of extreme West St. Louis County and St. Charles County, driving in St. Charles County yesterday and driving in West St. Louis County yesterday, I could hear the 104.5 FM signal crystal clear.
What?
It's amazing. Now, as I got into parts of West County, I had the additional melody of hearing Mark Lee Van Camp along with every few seconds a little bit of church music. So I would hear those gentlemen speak, and then I would hear a little bit of church organ music mixed in, which was a delightful remix. But Brad, I can't believe that people in St. Louis County and St. Charles County now, in their car, they could go in there today, set 104.5 FM as a preset, and hear Westplex talk throughout St. Charles County and West St. Louis County.
John, one of these days, I'm going to get liquored up, and I'm going to tell the whole KFUO story, which is funny you should bring that up because I'm busy working on something like that. It is so frustrating to me to deal with these religious broadcasters. You would think that And it's funny, my consulting engineer actually said this to me. He says the religious broadcasters think they have the red phone to God. I mean, that's word for word.
Yeah,
that's what
they do, right?
Well,
I mean, I call dial a prayer just to see what KFUO says.
Oh, man, don't get me going with that.
When I use my red phone, I call the subject to story number 2.
It's so frustrating. What was it yesterday? I would say that the KDHX people, I truly, one of these mornings, this show is going to be gone. It's just going to be God Squad in this station. I'm telling you.
Nice.
Up a notch to number
Brad.
2.
There's number 2.
The Post-Dispatch's Joe Holliman reports today, Senator Josh Hawley is teaming up with a Democrat to propose raising the federal minimum wage. I know this is one of your favorite topics, Brad, the minimum wage. Hawley is teaming up with U.S. Senator Peter Welch, a Democrat from Vermont. You know, that state that brought us Ben and Jerry's and that brought us Bernie Sanders. They're calling for the minimum wage to become $15 an hour beginning January 2026, with further increases based on inflation in subsequent years. Now, Brad, when people come to you and say, I think there should be a higher minimum wage, we need to pay people more, you put those folks in their place by asking them a simple question, Brad. Can you repeat what that question is?
Why not $100 an hour?
Why not $100 an hour? Why not $105 an hour, Brad? If we're raising minimum wage, why don't we just make it $100?
Maybe at 115, John, 115.
Hi, Billy Long just said, how about 120? Do I hear 125?
Did he really say that?
No,
Oh,
he
okay.
was just, he listens. Well, I shouldn't say that. Anyway, if an auctioneer were here, Brad, he would probably say, I hear 125. Hey, unions, do I hear 130? So we're just continually increasing the minimum wage, Brad. Make those companies pay more money.
John, 2 things. I had dinner with my youngest son last night, which was interesting because my youngest son is, and I love my youngest son. He's a great kid, and he's my only one left here in the St. Louis area. All of my other kids have
And
moved
he's
away.
a communist.
He loves Bernie Sanders. And we had a discussion last night, and he goes off on me. He goes off on these tirades about, well, it's been proven that people should only work 32 hours a week, and the 4-day work week, he goes through this whole crazy thing. $15, and he's quoting FDR. Here's my 31-year-old son quoting FDR. My 31-year-old son lives in the past. All the artists he listened to were dead before he was born. You know what I mean? He's like one of these guys.
Yeah.
Oh, Jimi Hendrix is my favorite guitarist. Jimi Hendrix was dead 20 years before you were born, dude. Maybe even farther than that. Okay, so he goes through this whole thing, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm not going to even argue with him. I could have said to him, well, Drew, how about $100 an hour minimum wage? And then you could have your house, you could have a boat, and you could work 32 hours a week, and you'd have I've said it before. John, make the minimum wage $100 an hour. I'll get my job back at Steak and Shake if I can find one that's still open. I'll say, what day of the week do you want me to work? Pick a day. And they say, we want you to work on Tuesday. Okay, fine. I'm going to do a 12-hour shift. So I'm going to make $1,200, okay? So I'm going to go in 1 day a week, and let me do my math here. If I do 1 day a week and I do my one shift, and I'm going to make $1,200, 1200 times 52, I'd be making $62,400.
Not bad for a little curb service there, right? For flipping a few burgers.
Right, and the other 6 days a week, I'm just going to have fun. That's, and when you say that, see, the thing that always cracks me up, just like you baited me on that, people go, well, that's ridiculous. I go, well, if you're saying you want to have a livable wage, let's not screw around with pennies. Let's jack it up to 3 figures. Make it $100 an hour. $100 an hour, and then we'll see what the hell happens, right?
Yeah. I think when I hear stories like this, I think of Senator Hawley's team in D.C. and the folks back home, because they've got to learn some math. They have to practice hearing a little bit of math because they're going to get questions from people like Brad Hildebrand that say, okay, where is the line here? And I would presume that a lot of folks that choose to work for Senator Hawley are generally very free market people and who have been opposed to minimum wage hikes in the past. So I think they're learning a new set of talking points this week.
Well, what's the deal with him? Is he going full on Democrat? Is he going to switch parties or something like that?
No, not at all. And I think Josh Hawley is conservative on enough social issues that taking a populist bent here is, think about it this way, Brad. Who's going to do anything about this?
See,
like Josh Hawley just beat Mr. Extra Medium T-shirt guy by like 20 points. He's not up for election for another 5 years. We got a presidential race coming A primary is going to start in like a year and a half. Who's going to do anything to Josh Hawley? So if Josh Hawley wants to say, we're not cutting Medicaid, we're raising the minimum wage, like all these populist policy positions, who's going to do anything about it? If you don't like it, like nobody's going to do anything to Josh Hawley.
John, do you want an answer to your question?
I do want that.
Ricky Schroer.
Oh, wow. And he's going to do a reboot of Silver Spoons.
Right.
Or do you mean Senator Nick Schroer?
Yeah, the head of the Nutbag Caucus. Isn't that what he's the head of now?
Wow. You know, Nick Schroer weighed in on this policy yesterday.
I bet he did. And you know what he said?
What'd he say?
Isn't that what he said?
Wow. And is that your official Nick Schroer impression there?
You know, John, I'd be honest with you. I'm so tired of these nutbag, we're the Freedom Caucus. I mean, give me a break. Be an American, be a Missourian. Stop with the crap with the, we're the Freedom Caucus, the Patriot Caucus. That's so much crap. It just is. I know
there's a big caucus in Washington, D.C. that's getting ready for tonight, Brad, and you can watch it on television. It's story number one.
The number one.
The Congressional baseball game kicks off tonight. 6:05 Central. You can watch it, Brad, on C-SPAN, or if you have like Fox News apps, if you watch local Fox apps, you can get it streaming. I would suggest if you have access to C-SPAN or C-SPAN Live via YouTube, I believe C-SPAN has a live YouTube channel, that you can watch the Congressional baseball game. Missouri's own Eric Schmitt will be competing. This is the third year in a row. And as Fox News noted, Eric Schmitt was a key leader in pushing Republicans over Democrats and what Fox News called a demolition, a destruction of the Democrats last year. You can find an interview on Fox News yesterday. I linked to it at johncombest.com. Today, you can hear a Mark Reardon interview from yesterday's 97.1 FM, where Schmitt talks about the Congressional baseball game and funds from the baseball game. Schmitt noted on Reardon's show that the game last year raised over $2 million for charity. It goes to the Congressional Sports for Charity, and they support groups like the Boys and Girls Clubs of Greater Washington, the United States Capitol Police Memorial, and other worthy groups in the D.C. area. So Eric Schmitt is a top competitor, maybe the top competitor for Republicans on the Republican squad. Republicans versus Dems. It's a good-natured, fun game. You could check it out tonight, 6:05 p.m. Remember, Brad, in the olden days at WTBS, Ted Turner's station, all the Braves games would come on at 6:05. Well, this is kind of the same thing. 6:05, you can see Eric Schmitt and Republicans hopefully whip up on the Democrats.
Interesting. What I find fascinating about this is how many years ago was it that horrific situation where that doofbag, that Doombas Scheist from across the river in Belleville went over there and shot up the practice game? How many years was that? It was June 14th, 2017, Brad. So that was 8 years ago. And you know what's crazy about that is, remember that guy was a big Bernie Sanders fan. Okay,
he was, and it was not your son, to be clear.
Right. Why haven't people brought that up much? You know, I mean, if Eric Schmitt would give a hangnail to one of the Democrats in this game, it would be talked about for 5 years. But some nutbag shows up with a rifle, and it wasn't for a couple of Capitol. Were they Capitol Police officers?
Yeah, they were Capitol Police, I believe.
Capitol Police that put the guy, into what was Rush Limbaugh used to always say. He attained
assumed
room temperature. Why is that not talked about that much? Because, and I think I answered my own question, because he was a Democrat shooting Republicans, right? Wasn't that pretty much the...
Yeah, I think that's it. And actually, the media's been so obsessed with finding details about that Pennsylvania shooter of Donald Trump. They've really been exposing that guy.
That's disappeared.
That guy.
Boy, that's as interesting as well, too. Talk about not a story that doesn't exist anymore. And what did I hear the other day? Well, I couldn't believe this. Well, it only nicked his ear.
And remember, there's a lot of people that still believe it's a hoax.
Right. Okay. You know what I say to people like that?
What's
Okay,
that, Brad?
let's take you to the shooting range and let me zero in my rifle. And you don't mind if I come a little bit close to your head. What if I just nick your ear? Would that bother you at all? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I think with the shoes on the other foot, it becomes much different.
Am I wired this morning or what?
You are pretty wired today, Brad. And in fact, I had actually just taken my headphones off because I thought you were going to blow out my eardrums with a stupid Wizard of Oz quote when you said, "Guess what they would say?" So thankfully, my eardrums are intact.
John Cone Best, he's a man of taste. He's got a thing for a certain type of grace. He don't care about diamonds or pearls. All he wants is a girl with comfortable shoes.
How's that, John? Does that make you feel better?
I'm doing the gritty to it right now, Brad. I'm doing the gritty.
Okay, I just screwed up. Hold on a minute. I got to stop this.
Down in Missouri.
Hold on a minute. Okay, I got to stop these two. Okay, because we have to take a break.
Oh, no. I don't think I've ever heard that one.
What, this one?
In
Is that a Jay
small
Ashcroft
town
song or
in
Bill Eigel?
Missouri, where the rivers flow so wide, lived a man named Bill Eigel with dreams he couldn't
forgot
hide.
that one.
He had a heart for the people and a vision all his own to be the next Missouri governor, stand tall and alone.
See, I need to redo that. We do need to do it for the St. Charles County Executive, right?
I think so. Yeah, you could do one about Jason Law, and you could write it about some imaginary mayor's ball deal, Brad.
He's not even a mayor anymore. I don't think he is a mayor anymore. I think he's out of that. Anyway, we'll be back.